So, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the August Indicator of Behavior subproject meeting. I'm your chair, Charlie Frick from Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab. Glad to have everybody here today. I know slightly different day and time due to a Black Hat and DEF CON last week. We pushed things out an extra week. But I thought I would give a couple general housekeeping notes, go into our tech talk. Today we have some information to share about the latest reference implementation of the behavior bundle that we put up on GitHub, and then kind of open it up for some group discussion about last week's conferences and the upcoming Borderless Cyber. So if you're new here today, we're glad to have you. And with that, I think I will share my screen and go into some of our technical content, unless there are any opening questions. So I'll pause for a moment and see if anyone from the group has any items they need to discuss before we go into the technical talk. Excellent. Then I shall share my screen. And I'll move my Zoom windows around so I can see all of your smiling faces and avatars. And I will try to keep an eye on the meeting chat while I go over this talk. But if you do have a question and you feel I haven't addressed it, please feel free to interrupt. Always happy to make these a discussion, more so than just me talking at all of you. But as I said, today we're going to talk about the revision 2 of our reference implementation. So that should be the slide you're all seeing. And this is a little bit more technical deep dive onto the new features and changes. We will be providing a little higher level overview as well as information on the project next month at the Borderless Cyber Conference. But let's dive into it. So the biggest thing is last month we released a revision 2 of our reference implementation. There's a QR code and a link for anybody that wishes to access it on GitHub. It's freely available, and I'm going to talk about some of the new features. And just wanted to stress real quick a thank you to the OCA and the IOB subproject as a whole, that many of these changes came from your feedback. And so just showing that we listen, we incorporate, and together we're making this better. Also, along with the STIX objects and the schemas, we have some updated technical documentation. So if you go to that link, you'll find the JSON for the reference implementation, a folder for all the schema, as well as a PDF document that will go into gory detail, far deeper than what I'm going to address today in these slides. But we're just, in the spirit of transparency and openness, sharing as much data as we can. And personally, I'd also like to thank from the Applied Physics Lab, Mr. Kurt Korolenko for his hard work. And also, he's not with us today, but from University of Oslo, Dr. Vasilios Mavridis for his inputs regarding playbooks. And also, thanks to our APL sponsors at Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. CISA has been a long proponent of this work, and we're always grateful for their support and leadership. That said, let's talk about what we have up on the GitHub. So it's a reference prototype. Nowadays, it's up to about 3,000 line JSON STIX bundle. It's compliant with the STIX 2.1 spec. The scenario or use case, pick your term that you'd like to use, is a emulated attack based on APT37 Reaper, which is essentially spear phishing a user with a malicious macro-enabled Office file, using that to gain a foothold, escalate privileges, create a golden ticket from the Active Directory, and then access and exfiltrate sensitive data from a network. And to test this out and build this reference implementation, we created a test environment here at the laboratory where we emulate that enterprise network. We use the CMU Ghosts framework for user emulation. so that our targets are actually doing day-to-day office activities, writing emails to each other. All of that's automated so that that'll generate endpoint logs as well as network traffic to give us some background noise as we test and refine the detection analytics that we wish to include in the bundle so that we can vet for false positives and things like that. And along with that, we have a SIEM and a SOAR, some firewalls, as well as a few different sensors, primarily Zeek and Sysmon, with a few added analytics and features that I'll talk more about as we dive into the details. Additionally, for those that have seen some of these talks before, we here at the Applied Physics Lab are big fans of visualizing the STIX bundle in a graph database. We use Neo4j, open source database, and just sharing if anybody's interested in doing the same. Through the working group, or sorry, sub-project, we've put together a small Python script that's got a minor cosmetic update recently to convert any STIX 2.x bundle into a Neo4j graph database. It's what I'll use for a lot of the visualizations we'll talk about today, and just also sharing the link and QR code to access that part of the repository if you're interested in downloading and running that for any of your own work. So this very scary picture that I'll make a little, we'll zoom into different parts in a moment, but this is the entirety of the current reference implementation bundle as visualized in Neo4j. And today I'm going to talk a lot about some of the, sorry, but we're going to talk a little bit about some of the different objects and new fields and features that we've added to individual ones. But if you wanted to see the whole thing together, that's what it looks like if you try to visualize it. Different colors represent different types of objects. I won't belabor reading through here. I will say that these slides are available on our GitHub, and I will share that link out with the meeting minutes on the Slack and through the listserv so that anybody can get a copy of these and look at these pictures zoomed in to your heart's content. One of the first things that I wanted to stress was we have updated the extension definition objects in the bundle because the IOB project has been using some pretty heavy extensions to existing STIX objects as well as some custom STIX objects. And based on feedback and popular demand, revision 2 has the schema for every extension as well as these schema objects in the bundle. And so we kind of did the math to make sure that the embedded hyperlinks inside the reference implementation will take you to the correct part of the repository to view the referenced extension. We're also working with the other sub-projects within the OCA to provide an update to their STIX extension definition repository. So we have all that available to you if you really like to dive deep and see really the nuts and bolts of how we're enriching the STIX. That said, like I said, today I kind of assumed that most of us are familiar with STIX already. If not, I should have said at the beginning, it's a JSON format that's a standard representation of cyber threat intelligence managed by the Cyber Threat Intelligence Technical Committee within OASIS. Today I'm going to talk about some of the new changes. So at the start, one of the two big additions we've done right now is our behavior objects, the actual behavior STIX SDO, that's meant to describe a set of the observed procedures that we call a behavior. And we still maintain the links to MITRE attack patterns. But one of the things that we've really added this time around, one is a free text description field, kind of give the narrative summary of what that behavior represents. And also, based on some of the feedback we've had from Carter Bullard and the folks over at NEA Systems, we've added a behavior class field to categorize something as expected behavior, anomalous behavior, missing behavior, or emergent/new behavior. And so the data has now been included. And as before, for our behaviors, to kind of show our work, we have traditionally included a set of STIX cyber observables that we witnessed in order to define that behavior. Some feedback we had from folks interested in using STIX patterning was that they'd like to see us use the observed data SDO to kind of bin up which observables were tied to which behaviors. So we did that. One of the things that I will say, though, is a lot of the point for the behavior bundles is that we share detection analytics and correlation logic so that you don't have to build custom queries off of STIX patterns and from the observables. But just to stay compliant and keep everybody's capabilities working well, we've now added support for the observed data object. And still have our, just a quick example of our observables, so that the type of things we share in there are what we have seen in our test environment that led us to define our behavior. And it's also some of the building blocks that we've used to create the detections that we share. I do think it's a bit deeper in the weeds than most recipients would want, but we include it so you can see all the options you might have when creating a behavior bundle. This one is for showing the process of a Office application, Word, PowerPoint, or Excel, spawning a new process from PowerShell or command prompt. So this would be the macro inside an Office document, executing code and starting a command prompt. Also, as a quick recap, with each behavior, we share a detection object. We've been using Sigma format, base 64 encoded Sigma rules, so that we can share how one could detect behavior regardless of their technology stack. Sigma is fairly translatable into a large variety of SIEMs on the market. And based on some of our feedback, though, is along with sharing the detection, we should share information about the tools used for the detector. And so we've built out a detector object. Another thing that I failed to mention on the extensions you might notice is we also worked on a little bit of a renaming that before it used to say demo org. For consistency, we are branding all of the extensions on the IOB project to an XOCA to give attribution to the Open Cyber Alliance for these contributions. But we have a detector object where kind of used a CPE representation of the tool and provided some descriptions of it, talked about the data categories and the data sources. These we are pulling heavily from MITRE ATT&CK's knowledge base and referencing that appropriately. But we also will provide names of the products, URLs to the open source repository or the vendor site if somebody was sharing a proprietary tool. And that allows humans or the automation receiving this to know what tools were used to make the detection. Additionally, we take multiple detections and feed them to a detection group. And that's how we share the logic for how to correlate. The reference implementation still includes a base 64 representation, and we still have support for Cacao and are working on testing and refining that out, eagerly awaiting some of the new Cacao editing tools that project is working on and demonstrated during the June CASP workshop. And just zooming in a little bit more on showing this type of correlation logic that we are sharing that could be done manually, but the end state is to do this with automation, primarily recommended a SOAR platform to query the various alerts and look for commonalities between the fields. Now that said, I thought I would dive a little bit more into some of the new features that are coming with building the detectors, as well as new ways to respond to a correlated detection from a correlation group. And so we integrated a data source and data component objects from MITRE's ATT&CK repo. And we've extended the course of action COA from STIX. That's the dark purple here. And we've built a playbook object in the lighter purple that is based on the feedback from Vasilios and the Cacao team. So first of all, our course of action objects. Again, we tried to stay as close as we could to the pure STIX definition. So we still give the description of what to do, but we've added an extension so that you could know that we'd like this course of action to reference a specific playbook, rather than just say, run a playbook, which is what we've seen in the wild so far. And we thought it'd be better to extend it, give a proper reference to a playbook, and then represent the playbook itself. We did it this way because this allows us to link a course of action to multiple playbooks and multiple playbook formats if a organization wishes to do that, as opposed to, it was not a quite proper adherence to the standard to embed multiple playbooks inside the COA object. But that's why we did it this way. And so, as I said, that went into our playbook objects. Again, using the suggested format from the Cacao contributors. We have a base64 encoded Cacao JSON to take action on a correlated threat based on the course of action that it's associated with. Now, I know it was a bit of a fast run through there, but just saying these changes we added were all from your feedback, and we're going to continue taking feedback. It might be a few more months before we put a revision 3 out, but we're always open to receive comment and make changes to the reference implementation. We are going to also here at the laboratory start focusing on the building of some additional tools to make it easier for the community to use IOBs and create IOB objects. And so those will be some of the things that as we build and develop, we'll share, but just letting you know where things are coming at the moment. And for more information, of course, you can always reference the IOB webpage on the Open Cybersecurity Alliance website, or come to the GitHub to access reference implementations, technical documentations, talks, and a whole lot more. So I know that was a bit of a fast run through, but I will open the floor to any questions on the talk before I transition us to group discussion. So are there any questions, comments, or concerns? Jane, you're on mute. Oh, there you go. Oh, there we go.
Can you hear me now?
I hear you now.
Just want to let you know the Cacao TC met today, and the group voted to include a new official work product that is based on a proposed extension from Vas and Mateus. Mateus is on the call, so he was on the call.
Yeah, he's maybe
he could. Oh, okay, great. The extension is called the Cacao Coordinates extension, and it includes 2 extension objects, coordinates and connections. And I think given that you're building this out with Neo4j at the back end, I think it may have some bearing also on what you're doing. They have developed a proprietary, at this point, reference implementation. But Mateus, can you add anything else that might be relevant in this forum?
I think you wrap it up quite good. So this our extension of hours, we have today approved to be part of the technical work of the Kakao TC. So we will continue to work on this over there, and for sure we can talk offline also, Charles, and we can show you that.
Looking forward to it, Mateus. I definitely imagine that those will help dramatically for visualizing the Kakao workflow, and very glad to hear them included. Thank you for sharing that, Jane. Are there any other comments or questions? All righty. If that's the case, I will stop sharing my screen and transition us to just a quick set of discussions. I'll start with asking if anybody was at Black Hat and DEF CON last week, if they had any updates regarding any news from the OCA. I haven't received any yet, but the conference did just end. So I thought I'd check for a moment, see if anybody had anything. Fair enough. I would like to talk for a moment about the Borderless Cyber Conference coming September 11th and 12th at Royal Holloway in London. For those that can make it, we'll look forward to seeing you there. I'll be giving another talk on indicator of behavior, kind of introducing the project to folks that aren't familiar with it, as well as going over some of the technical details. And additionally, I'll be moderating one of the sessions, I think Monday mornings, and just welcome any discussion that folks want to have out there for those that are making it. For those that can't, we'll try to provide some summaries at our next IOB call. But I will say that due to the kind of calendar and conference schedules, we will be canceling the September IOB meeting, and we'll pick up in October, where we'll definitely share some insights before then on the Slack and listserv, but we'll make sure that that's on the agenda for October's meeting. And I know some people, and also just to share, some people had asked offline if we could work in an IOB meeting at Borderless Cyber. I did look into that, and it's a pretty packed schedule, and we're going to be near capacity for the event. So I don't think we'll be able to have it. But if anybody really wants to talk IOB, I'll be the very jet lagged man in a suit walking around, making sure he's saying the right name off the cue cards. So I'll be happy to discuss at your leisure during our time in London if you're out there. Any other? Oh, okay. Visualization of business risk. Sorry, for those that can't see the chat, Daryl is asking if there's a group in OCA looking at the visualization of business risk. And I don't think we have one. But I'm going to take a quick note, Daryl, because I want to vet that through Jane and Claudia and see if there's.
We should, I think we should have one, because at a macro level, one of the things we're not getting is communicating back to the business. Like, I've been talking to clients about this a lot from a historical perspective, and I'm not going to try to hijack the call, but like the last 80 years,
okay.
post World War II, there was a John T. Diebold, I don't know if I'm related to him or not, started a consulting firm called Diebold Group, and I tripped across it, and he was advising countries and companies everywhere globally at the time about how to adopt automation, and he graduated from Harvard, postgraduate or work or something, wrote a book, and he coined the phrase automation. And then that started this revolution of IT adoption that, started out back then, maybe 5% with telephones, faxes, and early tech. Now, fast forward to now, 95% plus business dependency on IT functions, and security is in an inverted risk model, right? Where IT gets 10% of gross, unless you're, a federal agency. And then below that, you have the security function. Well, you could have 5,000 employees, 100 IT professionals, excluding the service providers, right? And then have 5 security professionals. so you guys can see where the math goes bad. And we need a better way of telling the story with numbers in a picture to the business, because they, it's delinquent business risk. That's really what cybersecurity is. It's a reflection of delinquent business risk, not addressing risk as they adopted functionality from IT.
I agree wholeheartedly. And as Harley and Kurt are sick of hearing me talk about it in other parts of my life, I'm a very big risk geek. So I think that would be a great thing to get started up, and I'm happy to broach the discussion.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely, sir. Are there any other topics for discussion today? Questions about the upcoming events or any other,
Is there-
concerns about the
is it-
project?
No,
Go ahead, Daryl.
no concerns. Yeah, I just had that question, and I'm not pigeonholing, trying to pigeonhole or target anyone, company wise, right? Hopefully nobody
Yeah.
on here has ego and is thinking that they are their company, but, or whoever they work for. But, did you guys see the Google research release about 0 days? It's
I
probably not going to be surprising.
I probably need a little bit more detail. I've read a
Yeah.
couple, but I don't think there was one that's jumping out at me as the story. So
Week before last, they had a public release, and they talked about, and Tenable CEO jumped on the wagon with that one too, targeting Microsoft. But Google research said that 43% of all 0 days over the last decade can be attributed to Microsoft. That's almost half. And so I think that
Yeah.
has some impact on how we focus. I'm sure it does on how we focus with regard to threat vectors, right? And threat and attack vectors from a risk standpoint. Yeah,
I
I
think
just wanted
so.
to see if anybody heard about it, because that was like utterly surprising to me, that almost half over a decade.
Well,
So
I definitely can understand. I mean, I forget it's always misattributed, but there was always the quote about why do you rob banks? Because that's where the money is.
Right.
And
Hey Charlie, this is Joe Holanek. I'm new to this group. Hi everyone.
welcome, Joe.
I work with Carter Bullard at NEA. So prior to me joining, I've known Carter for many years now, but I worked at Mandiant for the better part of the last 10 years. And as you all know, they were acquired by Google. So I think a lot of that data comes from the investigations that we used to do.
in Mandiant.
Yeah, and I'd say I don't have hard data in front of me. So I'd say anecdotally, 80% of the investigations that I was personally involved in were all Windows based. Obviously you have, the Linux and Unix distributions throughout different environments doing specialized work, but most of the time, when you look at like the biggest vulnerability, they're usually people, and
Right.
user workstations are most likely always going to be Windows. You're going to have like your Mac environments as well, but typically most I hate saying it because I'm a Linux guy personally, but most of the work we used to do is all Windows forensics and investigation. So
Yeah,
that is probably
that's what I'm seeing too. That's what I'm seeing, and you're right. It's at the EDR vector from a functional area. It's the tools that are, or the technologies that are closest to people,
Mhm.
are the most permeable, like, because that's the most direct iterative point of engagement, right? And
Yeah.
and then you have just so many fresh targets sitting out there. But yeah, I'm worried about the spin people are going to put on it. But it's like, if they were a car manufacturer, then
Oh,
that's what I think about, right? If they were a product manufacturer and we used it every day, this stuff would never have happened. It's just, that's why I talk about risk. We have to start communicating risk more effectively to the business.
definitely agree with you there. And I think there's a lot more we can go with that discussion.
Yeah.
And there's a whole lot in the vulnerability management. I will say, just not trying to be overly political, but I will say Microsoft has made some pretty significant strides in addressing. They are the biggest target by far. I would say one of the biggest targets by far, but I will say they also anybody that was dealing with the state of Microsoft security 20 plus years ago, I think would agree with me that they've got a much stronger security model than they used to. Anybody that's ever hacked any computers over the last 30 years, I think would agree with that too. But yeah, it is.
A big part of
Go ahead,
that,
Joe.
Charlie, is that it's the landscape, right? That Microsoft covers such a huge amount of different types of hardware and things of that nature. So vulnerabilities are bound to be in existence. So it's it comes with the package, you know. It's
again, not making any endorsements, just saying if I throw a dart at a board to pick a enterprise environment and I have to guess the domain controller, I'm going to guess it's a Microsoft Active Directory server.
absolutely.
Yeah, Charlie, as you know, I've done a lot of that kind of incident response type of work in the past as well. And I mean, I agree with Joe in terms of just the percentage is well up in the 80 to 90%. But we also have to think about it from the adversary's perspective, right? They're targeting the development and, you know, the discovery of those 0 days because of where the market is and who's using the products and where they want to target. So it's both the penetration from Microsoft and their products, but and vulnerabilities in their software that can be in anybody else's software, but they're targeted more because of the amount of penetration they have in our networks. So
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't, you know, to kind of throw a category so that I'm not always just citing one company. If you go back 20 years, there wasn't a lot of Mac OS 9 exploitation research going on because there wasn't a whole lot of Mac OS 9.
Right.
I was one of the poor saps using it, but
Right.
but yeah. And like and even the last 5 years of seeing the advancement in exploit research on OS or Mac OS, I keep calling it OS X, but tied very closely to the rise in market share and the similarities from the iPhone, in my opinion. But anyhow, now I'm pontificating. But big picture, Daryl, I think the risk visualization project is a great idea. I know we here at the lab have done a few things in that arena, but I think a open avenue would be a really good approach, because that, along with some of the understanding where the right quantitative measurements can go, big fan of loss expectancy curves for capturing the impact. Not open to debate, not the biggest fan of making probability distributions on individual ticket counts to come up with likelihoods of attack and things like that. But I think there's a lot that can be gone with how we convey the concept. And the goal of IOB being to drive automation, I think conveying the risk of courses of action are going to become paramount. And I will say that's probably some side research that we're very interested in here at the lab, because I can guarantee you 1,000-fold increase in processing speed of an automated versus a manual security process. But I also have a sneaking suspicion that I'm going to try and collect some data on that selecting courses of action fully automated without any thought of risk is a great way to disconnect a whole lot of domain controllers from a network. And I'm sure nothing bad's going to happen if they all have their network interfaces turned off at once.
Well, and if an adversary is behind and persistent enough, he can see what your automated actions are and trigger them as a default false avenue, right? So,
yep,
yeah, they just creating those. Yeah, the reason I think I agree with. I think thanks for validating it. And a great intersection is to go if we can engage more CIOs and talk about their BCDR strategy. That's a good starting point from a common vector to talk about how they prioritize recovery, right? RPOs and RTOs, and that will help us understand the maturity level with understanding their dependency risk, how they think about it.
And I think it would also play a big role. We're starting to see it, the hard lessons come out right now in the cyber insurance markets of how there are obviously two very different risk pictures in the heads of the customers versus the insurers. Jane, I think I accidentally cut you off. You see your hands up.
Put it up. Actually, I just want to let Daryl know that a couple of years ago, there was a fellow from the FAIR community that reached out to me, and then I facilitated an introduction to the CTITC. He was very interested in doing a mapping of the FAIR framework to STIX 2.1. So Daryl, if I could get your email, I'll dig into my archive and see if I can find his email address, because it seems like he might be someone that would be interested in being a co-sponsor of such a sub-project.
I think that'd be an awesome approach to take. Okay. Any other general discussion topics today? Well, as people are sick of hearing me say, I always take awkward silence as concurrence. And I am grateful for y'all's time. For those of you that are flying out to London next month, I'm looking forward to seeing you in person. For those that aren't, I'm looking forward to talking to you in October when I hopefully should have recovered from the jet lag. So
Nice.
it's going to be a little rough one. I've ended up with the bad timing, and I have 3 conferences in 3 weeks. So
Oh, wow.
Borderless Cyber's the first one, so I'm going to be the most awake for that.
That's important.
Exactly. All right, everybody. I'm going to stop the recording. If anybody has any additional things they need to chat about, please feel free.